I don't know about you, but I am happy today. I'm seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. We're seeing states like Texas and Mississippi, they're stepping up and they're saying we're going to go into the next phase of this battle against COVID-19, the personal responsibility phase. We're not going to outlaw you wearing masks or your business saying that we want people to wear masks here, but we're going to say this is going to be handled differently depending on what state you live in, what city you live in, what area of a city you live in, and then, of course, your personal situation. Do you have pre-existing conditions? Do you have the vaccine, et cetera, et cetera? So in response to what's happening in Arizona with the governor, Greg Abbott, and, of course, also in Mississippi, the president was asked about his feelings on the topic. Here's what Joe Biden said.
Message to Texas and Mississippi. Texas and Mississippi.
Texas, I think it's a big mistake. Look,
Touching his mask.
Everyone's realized by now, these masks make a difference. We are on the cusp of being able to fundamentally change the nature of this disease because of the way in which we're able to get vaccines in people's arms.
Touching his mask.
We've been able to move that all the way up to the end of May to have enough for every American, to get every adult American to get a shot. And the last thing we need is the Neanderthal thinking that in the meantime, everything's fine, take off your mask, forget it.
All right, so a couple of things. Number one, he called it Neanderthal thinking. Neanderthal thinking is what he's saying is happening in the state of Texas, Mississippi. I assume he's talking about South Carolina and various other states who have done some of these rollbacks. He's also pulling at his mask a lot. And I know Joe Biden knows this, but it makes your mask completely and totally useless to tug at your mask. You're touching your face as you do this. And if you're struggling with an ill-fitting mask, it's as bad or maybe even worse than wearing no mask at all in so many situations because your fingers, your hands are touching your face. But Biden's not a fan. He says it's Neanderthal thinking, a big mistake. And he's saying that everybody is going to just go AWOL with the mask wearing, which is not going to be the case. Most of the polls I've seen so far, a lot of the TV stations and newspapers are doing these right now, by the way. You will see the results over the next couple of days. Most people are saying they're going to continue as they are. They just don't need the state to tell them to do so. It's a new era. Here's where we are. We have two factions. One faction is people who think we should now be in the responsibility era. Personal responsibility guiding us to the decisions that we make. Do I have pre-existing conditions? Am I in an area where there's a major issue right now with an outbreak, et cetera, et cetera? And using those situational data points, you make a decision for yourself. That's one, the personal responsibility camp. The other camp we're running into is people who seem to want to do this a lot more. And I'm not kidding with this, nor am I being sarcastic. I'm being serious. There's a lot of people who are now embracing the idea of wearing masks in perpetuity or wearing masks every single winter. Look at this. Here's Michael David Smith on Twitter, blue check. He says, I expect to wear a mask every winter for the rest of my life. The flu is nowhere near as bad as COVID-19, but it still kills thousands of Americans every year. And wearing masks dramatically reduces the spread. It's a tiny individual sacrifice for such major benefits to society. Now, I don't know Michael David Smith, but he looks like a young guy to me. He wants to, for the rest of his life, for every winter, wear a mask wherever he goes. Or at least he's going to signal to us right now that that's what he wants to do. Well, where would these ideas come from? They would come from people who are working closely, in some cases, with the Biden administration. Listen to this. Here's CNN this week.
As we figure out what flu strains have been circulating in places like Australia or South America, which sort of predicts what strains are likely to come into our country. There's been so little flu in those two areas, I think it's going to be hard for us to try and figure out what flu strains to pick. But you're right. If we mask and social distance every winter, we will see a dramatic reduction in flu, which usually causes hundreds of thousands of hospitalizations and tens of thousands of deaths. I wonder whether that will be the lesson.
There you go. He's saying, hey, if we simply just keep masking every single winter for the rest of our lives, we will see a reduction in deaths and hospitalizations from the flu, because we've seen that now with COVID-19. We'll also see whatever is left of COVID be knocked down quite a bit because of what we're doing. This is something that they're embracing, and I embrace the ability for them to do so. I encourage you, if you really want to do that, if that's what makes you feel safe, that is your personal decision. but that's in the personal responsibility column. That's not in the other column, which seems to advocate for the state sanctioned order of people to do things, or the national sanctions to be put in place that make people behave this way. All right. So don't get that confused. If you want to do this every winter, go for it. I'll leave you alone. You can live your life and enjoy it. But if you want everybody around you to be forced out of this personal responsibility category and into your category where it's mandated, I'm not on board with that. Maybe you are. Let me know in the comments below, and we'll continue here. The CDC is soon expected to advise fully vaccinated people that they can gather unmasked in small groups indoors. This is going to spread a little bit more of this excitement where people see things kind of loosening up a little bit. But what will happen with the polls in Texas? Let's lock this in for a future video. Greg Abbott's latest approval rating has him at about 46%. For the record, that's only 1 point ahead of Joe Biden in the state of Texas from this UTTT poll. And they're doing all right with vaccines. They've opened up things in Texas to child care workers and other groups, expanding the vaccine access in the state to teachers, including pre-primary, primary, secondary, and more, staff, bus drivers, those who work with child care providers and licensed child care providers and learning centers. All of this is starting to open up, with 3.88 million people in the state of Texas already having that first vaccine. They find themselves moving from the first section of the rollout timeline into the second section, 1C and 2, before they get to broad supply of everybody. Finally, some of the reactions. Michael Moore says, Texas, we hear you. You didn't want to be a part of our electrical grid, and now you've removed your mask mandate and are allowing large crowds to gather. We hear you. COVID is a hoax, so you don't need our precious vaccine. We'll send it to people who are saving lives by wearing masks. No vaccine if you don't comply. Also, Keith Oberman, these people have millions of followers combined. Why are we wasting vaccinations on Texas if Texas has decided to join the side of the virus? And following up afterwards, calling the governor a mass murderer. There it all is in a nutshell, and it's all Neanderthal thinking, according to the President of the United States. I hope people can start to come together on this. I hope that we can realize that this is not something that we have to fight over. We can have people who are into personal responsibility and people who want to continue to wear masks and do things that make them feel more safe. Great, good on you. But what do you think? Let me know. I know you always do. I appreciate your comments, and I always read them. So let's see your comments on this video and your thoughts. If you like what you see today, hit the share button, please. Hit the like button, interact in some way, and make sure you're following. Hit that follow button over on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube, and we'll see you again tomorrow.